Ladies and gentlemen,
Good evening.
Are you ready?
Okay, here we go.
You're listening to the Deal Room Podcast. Join us as we bring you the inside scoop on business sales and acquisitions. Get across trends in the area and hear the industry's best recount their real-life tips, traps, and experiences. Now, here's your host, Joanna Oakey.
Hi, it's Joanna Oakey here and welcome back to the Deal Room Podcast, a podcast proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. Now, today we have the second part of our two-part series talking with one of our clients, Peter Hughes from Kikada Lane Dental, to bring you the real story of being in the middle of a transaction and discussing a different take on aggregation models. Now, if you haven't heard part one, highly recommend you head back to your podcast player and go to the episode just before this one and seek out part one of this two-part series. In part one, we looked at the real story of being in the middle of a transaction. We looked at the unique model that Kikada Lane uses as an aggregator of dental practices. We look at the issues aggregators can have. We look at the practical steps Kikada Lane take to enhance deal success. We look at valuation models. We look at explaining the accounts normalization process. We look at where deals can go wrong, and we give you a lot of insights about the deal process. But today we are in part two of this two-part series, and today we look a little bit more at acquisition models. We look at the risks, like, for example, losing high performers. We look at a potential better way to eradicate those risks of acquisition. We discuss the importance of HR advisory and recruitment for aggregators and also for businesses and dental practices as a whole. We look at the benefits of having a larger support team behind a smaller business or practice. We look at how to test an aggregation model. We look at the concept of branding or not rebranding, as the case may be. We point out some early wins that Kikada Lane are experiencing that show how the model is actually working in practice. We look at the short and long-term plans. We look at differences between aggregators in the industry. We also give a client perspective on working with the team over here at Aspect Legal, and we round it up by providing a bit of a cautionary warning for sellers to make the most of your exit price by ensuring that you don't leave it too late. Well, you're in for a fabulous end to our two-part series with Peter Hughes of Kikada Lane Dental. Buckle in and here we go. Well, let's talk. I'd like to go back a bit, talking about the model that you're using. And maybe before we do that, maybe if you could give us a little bit of a background of where were you before you had this idea of Kikada Lane?
I've been all over the place, to be perfectly honest. I've had a bit of a tortuous. Maybe I'll start from an academic standpoint because I sort of left the field there too. I did a dual undergraduate degree in architecture and environmental science, and
wow.
Then did an MBA after that. And I was fortunate to win a few awards when I did my MBA, and I was then invited by the university to undertake a doctorate in business administration. So I completed that over a 5-year period. So, I guess I'm a jack of all trades and master of none in many, but
That's not true at all. I'd say master of them all, but I'm fascinating in your initial studies. I don't think I ever knew that. That's fascinating, Peter.
Yeah, so that I guess the thing that architecture taught me more than anything else was how to problem solve, and that was the big take out of that. But I guess from that standpoint, I got into, I did practice as an architect. I got into project management and construction, and it was mainly, funnily enough, geared around big health facilities. So that's where I got my grounding in the healthcare space. And I guess one of the largest chunks of my career I spent with a very large Australian company called Lend-Lease Corporation. And I was there with them when they become, from a standpoint of them being a big Australian company and going on to become a big multinational and global enterprise. And I spent 11 and a half years with them, and I started off in a business development role, and I ended up as the CEO of their global healthcare business. And I spent 3.5 years my time with them working in the United States, living and working in the States. And I was fortunate enough that I worked with some of the real big names over there, like Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins Medicine, Harvard Health, Mass General, UCLA. So I got some fantastic exposure into what was happening at the cutting edge in healthcare, and particularly around technology and how technology was going to impact patient treatments from a number of different standpoints. So yeah, it was a big, lumpy business that I had. I had projects all around the world. Even back then, 20 years ago, a lot of those projects were valued at well over $1 billion back then. So there was a lot of pressure, but it was a real, I guess, point in the sand for me from a career standpoint, because I learned so much during my time at Lendlease. And I guess I came back to Australia after my time with them and did some turnaround assignments in some large research facilities. Did a big project for Epworth Healthcare down here in Victoria and built a new hospital in Box Hill and became the operational CEO of that hospital. And that was, again, a very interesting project. Even though I'd constructed a whole heap of them, I'd never really run one from that standpoint. So, again, I learned a lot. But I always had this penchant of wanting to form and run my own businesses. And back in 2005, I formed this group called the Akira Medical Group. And we had two operating divisions. One was fairly much a property-based division where we built, owned and operated large-scale integrated healthcare facilities or medical clinics, and we populated them with an array of diagnostic and allied health practitioners to service the needs of GPs who are diagnosing patients in their surgeries with westernised disease states such as obesity, sleep apnea, diabetes, etc. And we created this platform where we could put all the inputs from a patient visit into one record and send it back to the GPs and sequentially schedule those appointments. So it really made it easy for the patient to come to one destination and have a number of matters fulfilled in one visit. And the other part of that business was a dental business. And so, and that was fueled primarily because we had clinics, dental clinics in our medical facilities, and I didn't think they were run very well. And so I thought I can do a better job than this myself. So I formed my own dental division and then set about acquiring practices around the country. And we received an investment into that side of the business from a large private equity group that really kicked that along at a rate of knots. And so that's how I really got into the healthcare space in a big way, and particularly into dental. And that business still runs today and is still successfully trading today. But I, again, spent about another 11 and a half, 12 years building that business. And I got to the point where I thought I really wanted to do a few other things. And that, again, I didn't feel I had the model 100% right in that business because of the sustainability and continuity of earnings position.
And what was that model at Akira?
That was a model where we acquired 100% of practice, and we had the principals on an earnout anywhere between usually a 2, 3, 4, 5 year period, and pending the size of the transaction and the parameters around that transaction. But at the end of that earnout, the principal could effectively just get up and walk away. And there were exclusion zones and restraint areas geographically, but when you lose a high performer, it can really put a significant dent in the business. So I thought there was a better way of eradicating that risk to a business by creating a more of a partnership model with the principals and incentivising them the whole way through the journey. Even up, if we create another exit or liquidity event, it will give them the incentive to keep performing and growing revenue up to that point and even beyond that point, because I have such a strong investment, whether that be in a listed company or a larger group.
Yeah, really, I guess, giving the incentive, because they're participating in, the end benefit to everyone, I guess, the end growth. And so was there anything else that you learnt from that period where you're undertaking all those acquisitions with Akira? So one was, this element of the model, but what else did you learn over that time?
I learned that a lot of dentists love the craft and the practice of dentistry, but really don't like some of the back end things that have to occur to support the practice. And one of the big bugbears is HR issues and recruitment. And so I really learned during my Akira days that you must have a very strong and well-rounded HR advisory and recruitment component to your business to be able to support the practices and the principles. And we have that now. And I felt it was a failing of my last business that we didn't have that sort of strength to support the practices. And a lot of aggregators will say that they've got it, but I know a lot of them haven't. And we demonstrate what we've got just about every day to our principles. And I think it's a real strong point. And the other things are, the financial reporting and the payroll management, keeping up with changes in award rates for staff, IT issues, the landscape changes so significantly, so quickly, equipment issues, support for CapEx and new technology. So I think there's a lot of elements there that, if you've got a solid corporate group behind you, can really help you run a very efficient practice. And I think coming back to the HR standpoint, one of the things that I've really learned is you need to have the appropriate structure from a human resource standpoint within the practice. So we've found a lot of practices are overstaffed. They don't have their staff on the right sort of contracts or agreements. And so their labour rates are excessive, and it really hurts the profitability of the practice. And just with a few tweaks here and there and a bit of restructuring, we can create a far greater and more efficient use of resources. And I guess finally, one of the things that you do get from critical mass is procurement efficiency, and you can certainly leverage suppliers, particularly around consumable products and laboratory prosthetics to a significant degree, and you can create mass savings through the group that can be passed down through the practices. So, and you only get that from size and the relationships you build with your suppliers.
I love it. I love anything that's a new model and a new way of approaching things. But, I particularly love the model that you're talking about here, doing something a bit different. But did you have to, how did you test the model? How did you know that this was a model that was going to work?
A good question. Before I even sat down to write the formal business plan for this, I actually consulted with about 30 to 40 dental practitioners, some who'd been acquired by corporates, some who were running standalone practices, some that were in advisory roles. And I just canvassed what I was attempting to do and asked them, one, do you think this would work? Is it a good idea? Where should I attenuate it, change it, add or take things from it to make it really attractive to a practitioner? So I guess I road tested it to some degree before I sat down and wrote a plan around it. So I had a fairly good feel about what would work and what wouldn't work before I actually embarked upon activating anything. There is one other thing that I learned too, and that's about branding. Some corporates go out and they totally rebrand everything from day one. In my view, I think, one, it's unnecessary, and two, it erodes a lot of the goodwill that's been built up in that practice name immediately, and you just don't get the benefit from, the trading that's gone on. And often when a patient sees a practice has been taken over by someone else and it's got different colours and different names on it, it creates anxiety. And, one of the primary reasons people don't go to the dentist in this country is anxiety, fear and cost. So you don't want to give the impression that you've changed anything initially. It can be done far more softly and in a slower way that brings everyone along, rather than take the hammer out and smash up a new sign from day one.
I love it. That's such a good point and rarely commented on, actually. So I just, it's quite innovative looking at it from that perspective. And one of the other things that I guess, I guess you're sort of early on in the model in that, there's quite a few acquisitions that you've done so far, but you have a long runway for the future. But maybe if we can talk about some initial wins. So what are some things that you can see from some of these initial practices that you've acquired so far that are really, now starting to show how the model works?
Look, I think one of the things that we're able to do from day one is I can see when I look at a set of financials where the soft spots are and where we can refine things to create a far better uplift for the participants involved. I think, and around that out, we have a very good marketing division in our company that's very, very skilled in all aspects of print, digital, verbal, written media that can really elevate and attract additional patient volumes to the practice. And we devise programs that are site-specific around specific spheres of dentistry, or they can be umbrella policies that we put across the whole group and make available to everyone. But I think that's another area that obviously a dentist owner may not have a lot of skill in, but it's something our team does, and it complements all the other things that we do in the practice. So in terms of early wins, we've been able to acquire practices at an agreed maintainable EBITDA, and we've been able to substantially increase that number even within a 12-month period, just through some rational thinking and some application of marketing, etc. That's created no stress, no drama on the principal, apart from the fact that they might need to hire another dentist or another hygienist or OHD.
To cope with all the new business.
The new business is coming in. So, but we do that anyway for them. So
right. Yeah. And so what's the long-term plan, Peter? What's, what does the short-term and then, long-term future look like in your mind?
The short term is to keep sourcing, I guess, practices that are attractive to us to come into the group that will complement the skills that we've got. And I think the other point of differentiation that we've got is a lot of other aggregators will only acquire general restorative practices, whereas we take on board specialist practices, whether they're endodontic, orthodontic, oral surgical, etc., because our model can facilitate taking that type of practice on board. And we see that as highly beneficial because it creates an opportunity to inter-refer amongst the group. So there's no patient leakage outside to an external practice because we can usually cope with what's required from the skills that reside within the group. But so short term is to keep building the way we're doing, to keep refining, to more fully automate our processes and systems because that creates less stress on resourcing. And we've spent a lot of time already doing that. But I guess the end point is to try and create enough volume from a practice number perspective and an EBITDA perspective to be able to create an attractive initial public offering and to list this group to really create the wealth and the upside for the participants that have come to us and trusted us to help them realise their ambitions.
Absolutely love it. And actually, I've got a sort of a side question here, but it's back to this whole branding discussion we had, but a little bit of a different take on it. I think it'd be interesting if we can just talk about, from a branding perspective, where the name came from, Kikada Lane.
I knew you were going to ask me this one. When I was writing this business plan, I thought, well, I really wanted to be a disruptive influence to all the other comfortable aggregators out there.
Love it.
And to create something that was a little bit different. So create a bit of noise in the industry. And I thought, well, what's a noisy, annoying thing? And I've often sat out in my backyard in summer and listened to cicadas, and they just, are in your ear while you're sitting there trying to have a quiet drink and a conversation. And I thought, I don't think I could actually call the company Cicada. So what's something that sounds like cicada? And that's how I came up with Kikada. And obviously the last three letters of Kikada are ADA, which is Australian Dental Association. Not that I'm stealing anything from them, but and then I thought, well, with Kikada, I really want to go on a new journey. So how do you travel somewhere? Well, you either go on a road or you go a laneway. So I tacked the name Lane onto the end of it. So I created something that I guess had some meaning to me, but also was trademarkable.
I was going to say, like you just nailed it, Peter, in terms of an excellent and trademarkable, protectable mark, which
yes.
Which is important, because there can be, in this industry, many industries, a habit of picking names that are fairly generic and descriptive. I just love it when people go against the grain and come up with something that's creative, Peter, very creative.
Well, here's a lesson I learned from a communicational marketing expert, and because I thought up the name Akira too when I was there, and everyone asked me where that came from, and I just said I dreamed it up, and there was no story behind that. But the thing that this communicational consultant told me, he said, if you can use the letter K in a name and keep it short, people remember it.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and
we might have to rebrand, Peter.
Alpha,
not you. You've obviously got it.
I've got two Ks in mine. Yeah, but that resonated with me. So yeah.
Fascinating. I've heard a lot in marketing. Never heard that one. I love it. Okay, yeah. K and keep it short. There you go, listeners. You've got some trademark branding tips here today as well.
There you go. That's right.
Okay, I love it, Peter. I love what you're doing. I love being on the journey with you, and I love someone who enjoys creating the process and innovating it with me as well, because I'm big into that side of things. But I love where you're going, and I just really wanted to dig into this story today. And I think what we might even do is we'll have you back in 12 months' time, and we'll do a recap. Where are we at now? And
hopefully down the lane a bit further.
Down the lane, yes. I love it. And maybe a bit of a different year to 2020.
Yeah, let's hope so. Look, I'd just like to give you a plug too, Joe. I mean, you have come on the journey with us, and for anyone out there, the Aspect Legal team is an absolutely excellent law firm to work with. They're very responsive, very supportive, and their work's exemplary. So there's a shout out for you.
Oh, Peter, that's so sweet. I wasn't, well, look, that's just really sweet. Thank you. Wonderful. Well, look, I just want to say an absolute massive thank you for coming onto the show. Look, we have a lot of accountants who are listening in and a lot of dental practice owners. So look, if any of them, if any of these accountants sort of identify within their client base some practices that they think really should be talking to you, I guess, first thing, number one, what do you think is something that will help them identify who it is that might be a really good fit with you? And number two, how do they contact you?
We've obviously firstly got a website, www.kikadalane.com.au. My mobile number is 0417 006200. Always willing to talk to anybody at any time. But I think multi-chair, multi-fee earning practitioner practices are attractive to us. But I think one of the cautionary things I would suggest to anyone out there thinking of selling or being acquired is to not leave it too late, because you don't want to leave it to the point to you reach retirement and then there's nothing there at the end for anybody. We find the best practices for us are the ones where the practitioners are in the prime of their career. They've got 20 years of work in front of them, real fire in the belly to want to perform, and they just go gangbusters. So they're the ones that are really great for us.
Brilliant. Absolutely love it. Wonderful. And we'll put a link in our show notes Of course. So if you're running along the beach or doing whatever you're doing, you're listening to this podcast, you can just click into the links and you'll get through to Peter or Kikada Lane and the team to express your interest. So Peter, once again, I just want to say an absolutely massive thank you for giving up your time to come to chat to us today on the podcast. I loved it. I hope you had a bit of fun too.
I did. It's a pleasure. Thanks, Jo.
Wonderful. Thanks. Well, that's it for our two-part series, all about taking a different look at aggregation models with our client, Peter Hughes of Kikada Lane Dental. Now, if you'd like more information about this topic, just head over to the show notes or to our website at thedealroompodcast.com, where you'll be able to download a transcript of this podcast episode if you'd like to read it in finer detail. There you'll also be able to link through to Peter Hughes and Kikada Lane Dental. And of course, you'll also be able to find details of how to contact our lawyers at Aspect Legal if you or your clients would like to discuss any legal aspects of sales or acquisitions. And finally, if you have enjoyed what you heard today, then don't forget to press subscribe on your favourite podcast player and maybe even consider popping over to Apple Podcasts and leaving us a review. Well, that's it. Thanks again for listening in. You've been listening to Joanna Oakey and the Deal Room Podcast, a podcast proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. See you next time. Aspect Legal has a number of great services that help businesses prepare for a sale or acquisition, to help them prepare in advance and to get transaction ready. We've also got a range of services to help guide businesses through the sale and acquisitions process. We work with clients both big and small and have different types of services depending on size and complexity. We provide a free consultation to discuss your proposed sale or acquisition. So see our show notes on how to book a time to speak with us, or head over to our website at aspectlegal.com.au.
Ladies and gentlemen.
That will conclude this evening's entertainment.
Thanks for listening to the Deal Room Podcast. To find out more about this episode and other episodes in the series, check out the show notes or head over to our website at thedealroompodcast.com.au.